Hi, everybody. It's John Stinson from the Easton Board of Education.
This is Chris Parkin from the Reading Board of Education.
And Todd Johnston from Region 9 Board of Education.
And I'm Rydell Harrison, Superintendent of Schools for Easton Reading Region 9. Today, we're going to be talking all about COVID. And so I've received so many questions from our families about all of the data points that go into decision-making regarding our learning mode, whether it is in-person learning, hybrid, or all in distance learning. And so today we're going to sort of walk through that process. We have some visuals for you to look at as well.
So Dr. Harrison, we've got this table up on the screen now. And this is the sort of transmission risk guidelines, all the various indicators that the CDC has. I know we have another table of all the state of Connecticut indicators that help to, sort of inform how we're going to sort of move from one learning modality, all in person or hybrid, to distance learning. Can you talk to us about these two pages and sort of how you think about these various indicators?
Sure. So one of the questions that I get often is, do we know whether or not this virus is being transmitted in our schools, either between students, from students to teachers, or teachers to students? And so that's really hard to track at the school level. We shared a little over a month ago that we had possible probable transmission within a school. But one of the things that the CDC gives us are these guidelines around what's the risk for transmission in schools, and really looking at these key indicators that basically it is the community spread that really helps to inform what's the level of risk of transmission in schools. And so you see that number of cases per 100,000 within the last 14 days. That's an indicator that we talk a lot about and look at locally. Of course, if we were at around 200, I mean, that's an insanely high number. So we're not looking at that number based on to determine what our learning model is, but that really just kind of helps us to see what's the possibility of what's happening in our schools. And so you see that 20 to 50, that is that moderate risk of transition in school. And of course, in the middle of a pandemic, we can't 100% eliminate risk, but we really want to decrease risk as much as possible. That really plays into our ability to keep our students and staff safe.
So when we get into that moderate risk category, that's what then would trigger and helps to square the difference between those and the state indicators that say, if you're approaching moderate risk of transmission, well, then you probably should be looking at a more sort of online version of school.
Sure. And so, so we have these indicators that come from the state, and these are designed to help superintendents to work with their health department to make decisions about what the learning mode should look like. And we really want to be flexible in this. And so there are no sort of hard numbers that when you get to this is the exact next step, but it really is looking at all of these pieces together. So our leading indicator, which you see comes directly from the CDC, is the number of new cases per 100,000. And we're tracking that on at least twice a week, really looking at that from digging into the data for Easton, looking at Reading, and then looking at both towns combined so that we could get a picture of what things might look like. That really helps us to think at the high school level as well. So we have that as our primary indicator or our leading indicator. Then the secondary indicators, there's a number of them here. The one that we talk a lot about is the percent positivity rate. And we're really looking at that not as a hard number, but what's the direction of change? Are we trending down with positivity rate or trending up? The other two pieces are not as clear as what's happening in our town, but really has some really big implications about our community health overall. So we want to look at the number of new cases or new COVID-19 hospitalizations and really tracking that number to see, again, looking at that directional change. That bottom secondary indicator, looking at COVID-like and influenza-like illness, that's also really just a way for our nurses to track, are we seeing the spread of the flu within our schools? We have not been seeing that, but that really would help to point us in some directions around our mitigation strategies working effectively. And I feel like that's a really strong indicator to give us a picture of where we are as a community.
Dr. Harrison, some of these seem to have specific data attached to them, and some of them seem a little bit harder to nail down. What are we tracking specifically on the local level, and what do those trends look like?
Sure. And so if we could take a moment and look at our dashboard, and this is a newly created dashboard that really just captures in one visual all of the pieces that we've been looking at to make these determinations. So you see here that we have the three indicators across the top, and then the current quarantines and isolations. And this is really key for us at the local level as we're making decisions to get a sense of what our current health numbers are. So I'll just take a moment and go across that top row. So again, we're looking at the number of cases per 100,000 and looking at that in each town and then collectively. So in Easton, we're at 29, Reading 27, and as a town, we're at 28. So you could see from the chart, even though it's small, you can see just sort of the trend as those numbers have been tracking, trending upwards, leading into Thanksgiving. They went down a little bit and then spiked. So we did see that after Thanksgiving spike. And now we're seeing sort of a decline as we're coming out of that spike. That really is not just a way for us to track sort of where we are, but I think it's also a really nice way for us to see the impact of community action or community behavior and how that really impacts our data, and really gives us a sense to say, all right, if we don't want to see those spikes again, then what do we need to do differently as far as our community gatherings and all of those pieces?
Because the schools aren't in this by themselves.
I'm sorry?
The schools aren't in this by themselves. It's a community effort.
Correct. Correct. And, one of my first messages to our families at the beginning of the year is, here's all the things that we did to open schools. Now it's our responsibility as the community to keep our schools open. And that really is done in collaboration with both towns and our local officials, and reminders from our health department just on what are the right things to do to mitigate the spread. The second is the positivity rate. And so we see that the positivity rate in Easton is 6.5, Reading is 4.6. And so on average, those two towns together, our two towns together, is at 5.0. And again, we see that spike in positivity rate sort of mirroring what we're seeing in the cases per 100,000. The next is hospitalizations, and this is specifically looking at hospitalizations at the county level. So you'll see the increase in the number of people hospitalized for COVID in Fairfield County. You'll see that increase and then again spike right around Thanksgiving, and then that decrease going in the opposite direction. That last indicator at the top is looking at our current quarantines and isolations. All of this data will be updated weekly. And we will have this posted on the district website so that at any time members of the community could go in and see how we're doing as a community, how we're doing as the school system. And this really looks at our current staff who are positive and isolating, and students, same thing, and then looking at how many of our staff or students have been exposed and are currently in quarantine. You'll see that these numbers are low. They have been, there were periods, particularly with our quarantining in the past, where those numbers were significantly high at that time. And that really helps us to get a sense of what are the potential staffing concerns that might be a follow-up to the number of people that we have in quarantine. One of the things that we've done over the last couple of weeks is we've increased our substitute pool by doing some real strong recruiting to get more people on board, so that we're a little bit more nimble in being able to respond to having a number of staff in quarantine. But we also know just that the impact of being in quarantine is really difficult for an individual and for our families. And so we want to limit the exposure to the greatest extent possible.
Dr. Harrison, how do you see the indicators of the dashboard changing over time, especially now as the vaccinations are starting to roll out?
Yeah, so one of the things that is going to be important for us to look at over time is once our vaccinations start rolling out, and we know that right now we're in sort of level 1B, 1A with vaccinations, and education staff will be a part of 1B. So we don't have a definitive timeline of what that looks like, but that will be something that we'll want to track. The percent of our staff that has been vaccinated, that will help us get a sense of sort of where we are and what's to be what's safest. The second is really trying to keep track of the unreported infections. Now, this might not necessarily be a dashboard number, but this is really important for us when it comes to getting a picture of what things look like at the school level. So prior to us going into distance learning, as a community, we were doing really, really well with keeping the school notified if there was a positive case or of an exposure. We have seen that trail off over the last several weeks. And so it is something going forward that we really want to make sure that we are reporting those infections, because that really helps us to make smart decisions about what's safest for our students and staff. So that is, we'll be going live, and we'll be making updates to that. It will be a link right off the main website, just so that we can get a clear sense of sort of where we are as a district, and always tracking that. And really I've been tracking that with our leadership team at the district level and in collaboration with our local health officials, but really just want to increase the level of transparency for the community, so that you can see the numbers that we're looking at on a regular basis. And you could also see sort of the impact of what's happening in the community and how that plays into our schools. That's going to be really important for us going forward.
Thanks so much for putting this together, Dr. Erickson. This is really helpful, and I think is sort of spot on with what a lot of people in the community were hoping to get. So thank you.
Well, and I appreciate it. And again, I appreciate all the suggestions from members of the community. And feedback is a gift. That's what I always say. And one of my quotes is, feedback is a gift and every day is Christmas. So it's important to get that feedback from our community to make sure that we are providing the information that is most helpful. Speaking of gifts, we're heading into this holiday season, and I just want to take a moment and say a huge thank you to our community, to our students, to our staff. Thank you for all of your support, for all that you do on a regular basis for our students, and want to just wish you a peaceful, a safe, a happy holiday season, and I look forward to seeing everyone in the new year.
Thank you. Happy holidays to you and your family as well, Dr. Harrison.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Happy holidays.